So for whatever reason, I'm really in the mood to talk about criminal justice related policy on this channel, and I already made a video or shot a video, I don't know if it's out yet for you guys out there in the audience, talking about how mass incarceration actually did work, and the arguments for how it didn't work are based on people deliberately using metrics that the program doesn't even take into account in order to determine effectiveness to obfuscate the issue that it did in fact work. And now I'm going to move on to stop and frisk, a topic that came up during my discussion at the Modern Day Debates thing, DebateCon, whatever you want to call it, because contrary to the myth making that is being put forward by lefties and the mainstream media, stop and frisk did work and it was not racist. However, there is an issue with the program, which I will talk about, but we're going to get into why it worked and why these people are wrong on the other side of this ad. Great sponsor today, Stay Winter Warm. Check out the ad and come to the other side. Heating costs are soaring, and according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the price of energy this winter is up dramatically. Multi-year highs is what we're talking about. If you have gas heating, you're spending 30% more to heat your house this winter, and if you have oil, it's not looking that much better for you. But luckily for you, there is a solution. Stay Winter Warm is now offering this little energy heater that is intended to heat a room in only minutes for 50% off right now at this moment. And this thing is legit. I've actually been waiting for this and texting my rep for this sample for a really long time, because I put this in my girlfriend's bathroom because there actually aren't heating vents in the bathroom in her new apartment. This thing is perfect. It can save you money on your electricity bills. On top of that, it can also heat a drafty room where you have to just crank up the thermostat in order to get that room hot. Whether that be a garage, a bathroom, or that one room in every household where it appears there just is no insulation in the walls. What's up with that? It also comes with a remote, which is great for lazy people like me, and you're getting it for 50% off, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and at the price that this thing costs, you can basically save that much in your heating bill in a single month, so it pays for itself. Pretty awesome all around. StayWinterWarm.com. So to understand a program like Stop and Frisk, or as it's actually called, Stop, Question, and Frisk, you need to understand the concept of broken windows policing. And the reason you need to understand this is because broken windows policing is a very proactive approach to addressing crime. Now, we talked about broken windows on this channel previously. I explained to you why it does in fact work, but it basically works on the premise that you can target certain crimes that have downstream effects that contribute to other crimes in order to have a better result. But because this is a proactive form of policing, you need to understand that the police were actually out there executing this program to essentially create a deterrent effect on the criminals that they were dealing with. And the target of the Stop, Question, and Frisk program was shootings and illegal guns, and gun crime in general. Now, the reason it is very important for you to understand that the effect that they were trying to look for is an overall reduction in gun crime or an overall reduction in shooting is because people will tell you that Stop, Question, and Frisk was racist, completely ineffective, and that is because they didn't retrieve a bunch of firearms. So we're going to address these things in order that I just said them, first and foremost with the racist issue. Now, as I said, Stop and Frisk was about shootings, illegal guns, and gun crime overall. And if we look to any of the shooting statistics for any given year over the last 20 years from the NYPD, one of the most data-driven police forces in the nation, you will find that minorities, specifically Black and Hispanic minorities, make up no less than 94% of the shooting suspects in any given year, and it's gotten as high as 97%. Now, in terms of the targeting of these minorities, they were never stopped more than 86% of the time. So they represent minimum 94%, and the absolute maximum amount of Black and Hispanic stopped in proportion to the overall stops in Stop and Frisk was 86%. So clearly, they are not being over-targeted based on the parameters of this program. Remember, it's about shootings. Number two, you have to understand that the NYPD is incredibly data-driven in their policing. They pioneered a program called CompStat. CompStat is essentially mapping crime geographically, and you do this based on reports, not based on arrests, because everybody knows who actually works in the criminal justice system, even though lefties like to pretend they figured something out, they solved the puzzle, that if you have more cops in an area, they will likely make more arrests, and thus, if you're going based on arrest, you might be getting bad data about crimes. This is why they go to reports, specifically reports of shootings. So if the shootings are being committed by minorities, and minorities are committing them against other minorities, it stands to reason that the police would be going into certain minority areas, and specifically minority areas with higher rates of shootings and overall gun crime. In fact, you can actually find arguments against stop and frisk that make the case for stop and frisk inadvertently due to the lack of knowledge that people have about the program, and these articles specifically talk about how this supposedly racist program is disproportionately in certain Black and Hispanic neighborhoods and not present in other just as Black or just as Hispanic neighborhoods. This is because the NYPD aren't targeting people based on their race or ethnic origin. They are targeting areas based on reports of shooting because they're trying to proactively address and suppress crime. Now, this was made abundantly clear by Mayor Michael Bloomberg during that audio that was released by a Bernie Sanders aide or supporter or whoever that supposedly condemns Michael Bloomberg as being an evil, racist, bad man and targeting minorities based solely on the fact that they are minorities. I'm going to play this audio because not only does it validate everything that I was saying before, but it actually goes into the next thing that we're going to talk about in relation to this program.
95% of your murders and murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York, it's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. You've got to get the guns out of the hands of the people that get killed. So you want to spend the money, put a lot of cops in the street, put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So it's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana that are all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them. And then they say, oh, I don't want that, I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They still have a gun, but they leave it at home.
So everything Michael Bloomberg right there just said was true. He talked about how more people are being targeted in these minority neighborhoods because that's where all the crime is. He talked about how there's an inadvertent result of minorities being arrested more for things like marijuana possession. But again, that's an inadvertent result. The main target is the gun crime and deterring the shootings. Obviously, if you have more cops there, those cops are going to notice crimes that they can notice while they're there. This is basic logic, and it should confuse nobody except for left-wing people who are dumb enough to support Bernie Sanders. That being said, he also says this one crucial point, and I need this to be emphasized. We talked about it on this channel before, but it's the key component to Stop, Question, and Frisk, and it is one of the key refutations to the points that the left have been making against this program for years.
And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them. And then they say, oh, I don't want that, I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They still have a gun, but they leave it at home. Say, oh, I don't want that, I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They still have a gun, but they leave it at home.
And that's really the heart of the program right there. Michael Bloomberg just laid it out in plain English. You would have to be on the far left not to get it, or you would have to be somebody on the far left who does get it and deliberately desires to obfuscate the program in order to argue it's ineffective to ignore that component. Yes, according to the Stop and Frisk program, if you find somebody in possession of an illegal gun, you clearly make the arrest, you prosecute that person, you put them behind bars, and you incapacitate that person. But more crucially, the whole point of the program is to deter people from carrying illegal guns in the first place, so that way there can be less shootings and less overall gun crime. So if you don't find a lot of guns on people per stop, that's totally fine, because you're trying to make it known that if you do carry a gun on you, there's a chance that the cops will stop you and they will search you, they will find that gun, and you will go to prison for that illegal gun. So not seeing guns in a large portion of the stops is a positive, not a negative. Yet every time the lefties talk about Stop and Frisk's alleged ineffectiveness, they talk about it in terms of the hit rate. They say the police only found guns in this percentage of the stops. Now, by the way, they do this trick where they look at the biggest year of the program where Michael Bloomberg stopped the most amount of people, and they say they only found it in 0.00 whatever percentage of the stops, therefore the program is completely ineffective. But what they're not looking at, what they're not talking about, what they're not addressing, because they can't address it, is shootings and gun crimes in the city of New York before and after this program. Because shootings did in fact drop in the city of New York during the length of this program. In fact, New York City was declared to be one of the safest big cities in the United States of America during the length of this program because it was effective in deterring the carrying of illegal guns. And if you're not carrying an illegal gun, the chances of you getting into a shootout are far less likely. If you're not carrying an illegal gun in the first place, the chances of you committing an armed robbery with a firearm are far less likely. So the program was effective. And when you compare New York City to other cities like Chicago, what you end up finding out is that the biggest difference in the crime drop in New York and Chicago is the difference in overall gun crimes, gun homicides, and other gun-related activities. And the numbers are absolutely staggering. I talked about this multiple different times on this channel, but there are more raw number of murders in the city of Chicago, which is a third of the population of the city of New York, than in New York. And this first occurred in around 2012-2013 because New York City used to average something like 1,800 and at some years 2,100 murders a year. And during Michael Bloomberg's time and the first years of Bill de Blasio, this was reduced to around 300 murders. That's extraordinary, especially when on the other side of this, in Chicago, we were seeing years of 600 and 700 murders. Again, at 3 times the less population, they had more overall raw numbers of murder, not even per capita. When you look at the per capita numbers, it gets absolutely insane. And this largely is attributed to New York finding a way, aka Stop, Question, and Frisk, to reduce gun crime in the city. Now, some of you are going to say, Sean, wait a minute. Hold on a second, calm down. You just talked about how in the early years of de Blasio, crime still fell, but Bill de Blasio ran specifically on ending the Stop and Frisk program. He talked about how he had a black son in his campaign ads, how the program was racist, and this was really Bill de Blasio just using progressivism in order to get rid of the crime. It had nothing to do with the program because the program was ended under Michael Bloomberg. But the thing is, it was not ended under Michael Bloomberg. The program was reduced significantly from the peaks of Michael Bloomberg, but the NYPD was still stopping, questioning, and frisking, and even under the progressive lion Bill de Blasio, who ran on the proportions of the stops being racist, it turns out the police who were using data-driven policing were still stopping relatively the same proportions of suspects related to their efforts in targeting shootings and other crimes. Now, the next issue you might have, if again you seek to challenge me and you're ready to get smacked down, is if I'm saying the program worked and Bill de Blasio did far less of the program, although similar proportions, then how can I say the program is effective? Because even when it was reduced, crime didn't immediately go up, and specifically shootings didn't immediately go up. And the reason I can make this case is based on the principle of marginal utility. And what this means is that if something is effective and it works at a certain level, it does not necessarily make it so that if you increase that effective program, you will get proportional increases in the effectiveness. And a good way to think about marginal utility, which is an economic concept, is thinking about water and the value of water. If you're dying of thirst, then a gallon of water is everything to you. You will literally give anything just for a drink so you can survive. Because that water is everything in that moment, that water is life, thus its value is off the charts. However, once your drinking needs are met, the next need that people typically use water for is wash water for yourself, to keep yourself hygienic so that way you can be healthy. Now, this is pretty valuable. It's not as valuable, obviously, as if you are dying of thirst, but it is pretty valuable and pretty effective. But after your wash needs are met, what's the next thing that you need water for? To wash other things, maybe your clothes, maybe some of your other stuff, maybe for other purposes. Sure, crops, whatever, your food needs to be taken care of by your water needs. Sure, makes sense. But after that, as we go on, water becomes less and less valuable after our basic human needs are met by this life depending on substance. We start realizing that it's really not that valuable when we have a certain abundance of it. So much so, we literally go to the bathroom in water. That's how valueless it is in our society once all of our basic needs are met with it. So in that same way that as you go up over and over again, water becomes less valuable, as you increase the stops beyond a certain point, they lose their effectiveness. And one of my major problems with Michael Bloomberg initiating this program is this program was very promising under Rudy Giuliani, and Bloomberg just expanded this without taking into account the marginal utility of the program. And through the expansion under Michael Bloomberg, he ended up having the effect of alienating people in New York City, specifically minorities who felt like they were being harassed by this program, even though overall a proactive policing response is what you want in a city like New York. Just look at the effect that it had on crime. So this helped churn people against actually doing what needs to be done in terms of criminal justice against the NYPD, and it was all done for minimal gain. There was a sweet spot and Bloomberg went way over it, and that's what caused some of the problems. De Blasio reducing it back to Giuliani levels kept the effectiveness because of that principle of marginal utility. However, de Blasio did not stop there. He didn't end it at reducing the programs of the previous administration, but keeping the same overall principles behind it. He actually eventually, during the height of the Black Lives Matter hysteria, got rid of this program. He got rid of the anti-crime unit, which was specifically and narrowly tailored to focus on illegal guns and shootings. And the justification that he gave for getting rid of this unit was so asinine. He said this unit is far more likely than any other unit in the NYPD to be involved in shootings with suspects, therefore it must be racist, therefore we must get rid of it. But if you think about it, the unit that focuses specifically on illegal guns obviously would be more likely to get into shootings because people have illegal guns and they're going after them. It makes all the sense in the world. But once again, when you believe this ideology of disproportionality, therefore being racist to population, not to levels of crime, you buy into all these crazy ideas and you start implementing terrible policies. And what I'm going to show you up on screen is going to be startling because Bill de Blasio made this decision in the summer of 2020. And in the summer of 2020, this chart, which by the way is a month-to-month chart, even though it's mapped over the years, shootings did this. They spiked above levels we had not seen since the 1990s. You can see the overall trajectory. You can see month to month we would normally see spikes during the summer, but the trend line was going down. But all of a sudden, 2020, the moment Bill de Blasio got rid of this program altogether, the guns came back on the street, the shootings came back instantaneously. It's absolutely amazing that this happened, but it just goes to show you the effectiveness of broken windows policing, the anti-crime unit, and policies, proactive policing like Stop, Question, and Frisk. Now, to be clear, the trend line of crime starting to spike in New York City actually predates Bill de Blasio making this maneuver. It goes back to when bail reform was passed, and now in the city and the state of New York, nobody can be held on bail for virtually anything. So with all those people not being incapacitated anymore and out on the streets, that caused spikes in criminality. But the most severe spike, the most dramatic moment in 2020 happened directly after Bill de Blasio decided for ideological reasons to remove the anti-crime unit specifically devoted to suppressing shootings in the city of New York. And there are real consequences to this. Earlier, I was proud to brag about New York City's low homicide rate, how it was one of the safest big cities in the nation. But New York saw a 30% increase in homicides. We went from around 300 murders in the city of New York, one of the safest big cities, the miracle of New York City, to 457 murders in a year. That's around 150 more people that were killed, taken from us, all due to the fact that Bill de Blasio has ideological goals that supersede the safety of the citizens of New York. And it's not getting much better in terms of the Eric Adams administration. First of all, the district attorney announced that basically, unless you murder somebody, you're not going to be pursued in terms of incarceration. They're going to look for non-carceral solutions. And Eric Adams, the guy who ran Tough on Crime, the guy who was a former cop, can never be trusted because he's a Democrat, because guess what happened after the district attorney made this ridiculous announcement? Eric Adams signaled support for her. He said he supported this idea because he's on board. This is the Democratic Party agenda, and it will lead to more deaths and a far worse New York City. Look, Stop, Question, and Frisk worked. The data is undeniable. Look at New York City's gun crimes in relation to Chicago. That was nowhere near as successful at implementing this program. By the way, this program is tailored specifically to New York because you need a large walking population and a mass transit population in order to initiate these stops. That's why the program had effectiveness in reducing knife crimes in London, and Sadiq Khan, of course, got rid of it, and we saw a spike in knife attacks in London. So when the geography and the circumstances allow for the implementation of this tailored program, it does in fact work, and the only way to make arguments that it doesn't work is to ignore the principle of marginal utility or pretend that the goal of the program is not deterrence and judge it solely based on hit rate for finding guns, even though that's not what the New York City Police Department was judging the success or failure of the program on. This is like saying that a Boeing 747 airplane is not effective in getting you from place to place because it can't get you to Mars. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Well, actually, they are the facts. If you disagree, let me know your wrong opinion down in the comments below. If you agree, let me know that opinion too. If you like this video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on my social media. Support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about the effectiveness of Stop, Question, and Frisk. Till next time.